Good evening, everyone. So, our teacher, Buddha Shakyamuni, has said, do not commit any negative actions, perform only virtuous actions, subdue your mind thoroughly. This is the teaching of the Buddha. 2005 years ago, our teacher came into this world for the sake of sentient beings. He manifested the aspect of reaching the state of enlightenment and proceeded to teach and gave us a whole collection of teachings of 84,000 bundles of these teachings. Although we are not direct disciples of him, in a sense you can say that we are disciples because we are indirect disciples. Right now in this life we have obtained the precious human rebirth characterized with all the freedoms and endowments. This is only the result of good karma that we have accumulated over our previous lives. So the advice that Buddha gives us for this life, this very life, is however long you live, 80, 90 years, however long you stay in this life, make sure you do not commit any negative action and perform only virtuous activities. So we should try to avoid negativity as much as possible. If we can completely avoid it, this is the best. If not, at least we should engage in it as little as possible, and we should try to establish virtue in the most extensive way in every possible aspect and opportunity. So we talk about establishing virtue, but also at times establishing negativity. And this is something that we do continuously every day, 24 hours a day, through the various activities of our body, our speech, and our mind. So it is very important here to consider that we're not new to Buddhism. You can say that we are old students in the sense that we have attended many teachings, we have received a lot of advice, we have developed some understanding, some intelligence, and therefore it's very important every day to, you could say, you can divide the day in 6 sections and examine your various activities. So turn the finger for once towards yourself, not towards others, and just say, what are my activities during this day? Activities of body, activities of speech, activities of my mind. So examine this thoroughly in order to see what is it that you establish. Right? So you have to understand that the Buddha has come for our sake, has given all those teachings, as we say, a very extensive collection of 84,000 bundles of teachings, and they are all indicate to us a graduated path that will lead to the ground of Buddhahood. We are disciples of the Buddha, so it is important to examine and understand what type of activities we accumulate. So we say that whether we do virtue or whether we do something negative, it can only happen through our activities of our body, our speech, and our mind. There is no other way in which we can commit these actions. So, for example, when we talk about negative activities through the body, we're talking about hitting other people or, showing a bad expression towards to others when we communicate, or killing insects without paying any attention or without thinking anything bad about it, and so forth. In terms of our verbal activities, negative activities can happen very easily during the course of a day at any conversation. When you start using abusive words, harsh language, when you're trying to say lies to others, and so forth, these are the ways that you accumulate negative actions. However, the most important ones are the activities that we create through our mind, because when we talk about mental activities, really we talk about the motivation. So if we compare the negative actions, that mental negative actions compared to the negative actions of the body and the speech, these are heavier, these are the most important ones, because we say it is the motivation. The motivation is what incites us, let's say, to pick up a stick to hit another person, or it is the motivation, the thoughts in our mind that makes us use harsh words towards others, and so forth. So bring in mind the fact that we are followers of the Buddha, the Buddha has actually come and taught us the graduated path to enlightenment, and has taught us the way of reaching the state of liberation, the state of omniscience, the state of the three jewels, and therefore it is totally inappropriate for us to engage in these types of activities. So we have explained that we accumulate negativity through our body, speech, and mind. Similarly, we have the opportunity to accumulate a great wave of virtue through physical, verbal, and mental activities. So the physical activities we're referring to here is, for example, prostrating, circumambulating, making offerings to the to statues or representations of the body, speech, and mind, and so forth. In terms of verbal activities, we can do our daily recitation, our prayers, we can accumulate mantras for the sake of others, and so forth. However, whether or not those activities become virtuous activities depends on our motivation, and therefore they depend on the mental activity. If the motivation is right, if we have a pure motivation inspired by pure faith towards the objects of our refuge, then we can engage in all those virtuous activities such as circumambulate, prostrate, make offerings, recite mantras for the sake of others, and that will have great benefit. The root of virtue that we create in this guarantees that in this life, wherever we are in society, whatever we do, we will have a mind that is joyful and relaxed. Why? Because we know that from our own side, we have no intention to cause harm to others, right? And that makes us very joyous. Okay, so we say that the most important thing here is mental activities. We talk about the mind. We talk about the motivation of the mind. We have all studied Lorik, mind and awareness. So we had that presentation of mind and mental factors. So here we're referring to mind, okay? So the mind, that is the thing that goes from one life to the next, this awareness that becomes the foundation upon which the various imprints that we create are deposited. So here lies the real danger. When the mind is really negative, then we are in danger of accumulating a lot of physical and verbal negative actions. Now, usually we go around and we say, no, today I didn't do anything negative. This is what we believe about ourselves. But actually, we will understand how much negativity we have created if we analyze carefully, breaking the day down into sections that are 1 hour long. So let's say between 1 o'clock and 2 o'clock, how much virtue did I do? Or how much negativity did I do? Unless you examine like this, you will not be aware of the negativity that you are creating. Together with that, it's very important to have an understanding of me, a correct understanding of me, I, because we say I create negativity or I accumulate virtue. So it's very important to correctly identify this I, this me. If you don't identify this correctly, then you will not be able to have a proper understanding of the law of cause and effect. So it's very important to understand that in a period of 24 hours, we actually accumulate a lot of negative karma. It's not that we have that intention. It's not the case that we wake up in the morning and we say, oh, today I will really accumulate negativity. It doesn't happen like this. Almost it happens without us being aware of it. So let's say right now you came into the center, you came here, you saw the statues, the holy images, you prostrate, you spend 1 or 2 hours in the center. And during that time, you are restrained, right? Everything is virtuous. But as long as you leave the center and you go out, negativity begins accumulating. You go into the shops, you see something, you say, oh, this is nice. That's a nice object. You generate attachment towards this. And from there, negativity begins. So we see a lot of objects that we consider to be beautiful. We generate attachment, or we see things that we dislike, and we generate hatred. And there is also very strong attachment and attraction between the sexes, the male, the female, thinking about each other, and so forth. So thousands of negative actions accumulated constantly and easily. So if it is like this in the course of a day, imagine what happens in the course of the whole life. It is actually due to our great attachment for desirable objects that we create the condition for all the conflict and all the disagreement and all the negativity that we accumulate. So to give you some example, we talk about the 5 objects of desire. We are within the desire realm, so it is very strong within us that we have this reaction. First of all, towards form. So when we see a shape, a form, a color that we like, immediately we become attached to that thing. We have very strong attraction. When it comes to sounds, again, we're very much attracted to sounds. Now, if that sound is Dharma teaching, then that's a different story. But usually it is not Dharma teaching. Here we're talking about different types of songs. And, the songs with their lyrics and so forth create different thoughts and then set up motivation within our own mind. The next one is taste. So food is a very big preoccupation for us, isn't it? So the food has to be appropriate, it has to be clean, it has to be exactly what is our today's wish or desire to eat. It has to be potent, like organic, grown under this and that condition and so forth. And then, of course, we want to have variety, and we justify killing all sorts of animals. In particular, in Singapore, there is quite a lot of, there is a preference for seafood, right? So all those creatures in the sea, they become part of your food because we find ways to justify it. We say, if I eat this type of animal, that will be very good. Perhaps it will be good for my health. It strengthens this organ or that function of the body or this or that. We find ways of justifying it. Basically, it's our very strong attachment. We never think that we are causing harm to all these animals that we catch to eat. We just take them as our food to satisfy ourselves. Then we have great desire or attraction towards the smells. So all the perfumes and the creams and all the things that we apply to the body are because of that. So it's very important we understand we are in the desire realm, so there will be very strong influence, but we must try to minimize those things as much as possible. As it is said in Lam Rim, we must make the effort to practice, to regulate those things during the course of the day as much as possible. So we talked about negativity. The opposite of that is virtue. We talk about virtue of the past, the present, and the future. And of course, it is that future virtue that will establish the state of Buddhahood. We don't know exactly when this will happen, but we know for sure that this is something that it is achievable. As the great Indian master Dharmakirti has said that the nature of the mind is clear light. So we know that since beginningless time, the mind has this nature of clear light, and it is only circumstantially affected by various afflictions. The other example that we can give is that you can visualize your mind like a white piece of cloth. Of course, it becomes dirty, but you can wash away all this dirt, and then you can restore the clothes to the whiteness, the brilliance that is their initial nature. So we can wash all this away, all the attachment, the hatred, the anger, the delusions, if we practice according to the instructions that Buddha Shakyamuni has given, the great Indian scholars have given us, the Lam Rim is providing. If we can meditate on the wisdom realizing selflessness, the wisdom realizing emptiness, first of all, listen to this instruction, then contemplate, then meditate on it, then we will be able to provide an antidote and remove all these afflictions. Okay, so as the verse says, do not commit any negative action, accumulate only perfect virtue. Then the third line says, subdue your mind thoroughly. So subdue your mind thoroughly. As we say, first of all, you have to identify what is you, what is yourself. And then you have to try to minimize all this negativity that you create in the course of a day, of every single day. So subdue your mind means subdue the afflictions. Make sure you do not come under the influence of afflictions. And this is not something that it is achieved easily. It's something that is only achieved gradually in stages. And the ultimate goal, of course, is to totally abandon, totally eliminate all afflictions. It doesn't come without effort. We know that it took our teacher, Buddha Shakyamuni, 3 countless great eons to achieve this. And that indicates that it takes a very long time to accumulate the virtue that is necessary in order to abandon all those afflictions. Eventually, when we totally eliminate all this, we completely subdue our mind. We reach the state of a Buddha. We reach Buddhahood, and at this point, we will have as a Buddha, you will talk about the transmitted and the realized Dharma, or the teachings of the Buddha. In terms of the realized Dharma, this refers to the qualities that are developed in the mind of the Buddha, such as his compassion, bodhicitta, complete realization of emptiness, direct realization of emptiness, and omniscience, clairvoyance, and all the powers. Okay, so the last line says this is the teaching of the Buddha. So it's very important to understand that often when we talk about Buddhism, we think about the statues and the tangas and things like that, but this is not it. Here we talk about the teachings of the Buddha that are very precious and very important. And there are only 2 types of teachings of the Buddha, the transmitted and the realized teachings. The realized teachings is something that really we have to make an effort to see if we possess this within the measure of how much we possess in our own mind stream. So, for example, do we possess the virtue of abandoning the 10 non-virtuous actions, or the virtue of having lay vows, and so forth? So this will be the realized teachings. As for the measure of the transmitted teachings, of course, we have the 84,000 bundles of teachings that the Buddha gave. We have Lam Rim teachings, such as the Lamrim Chenmo by Je Tsongkhapa, and other different types of Lam Rim taught by Indian scholars and masters, and so forth. What is the measure of the transmitted teachings existing in a place? We say that in the place, if we have an assembly of the 4 ordained, then we have the teachings. So this refers to having a group of a male and female with full ordination, Gelug and Gelug Ma, and male and female with Genyen ordination. Okay, why? Because if you have those, then it means that you have the vows of those classes, the Gelug and the Genyen vows. Okay, so we're talking about the Dharma here, and we need to understand that when we talk about Dharma, we don't just talk about the sound or the words that perhaps you hear and you say, oh, yeah, I understand these words, I understand what it's about. When we talk about Dharma, we talk about something that has the power to transform your mind and improve your mind. To be able to experience that there is some progress and some benefit every day is not something that is very easy. First of all, you have to find a teacher. You have to rely upon the teacher, receive some instruction, and eventually the blessings of from that relationship of the teacher will come to you, and this will bring the gradual improvement of your mind. So this is what it means. This is how we understand the term Dharma. So we, in particular in this class, the Dharma that is taught, as we say, is the Lam Rim, the graduated stages of the path to enlightenment. And we spoke last week about the Lam Rim. We explained that the text that we're doing is actually a text that gradually consolidates the 84,000 bundles of the teachings that the Buddha gave. All those things were consolidated into Lam Rim Chenmo. And then from Lam Rim Chenmo, the great exposition, we came gradually to shorter and shorter texts, to the point that we come to this one, the short one, the Song of Spiritual Experience. It is short enough to be able to memorize it and recite it every day as part of your prayers. Now, we have said that one aspect of the Lam Rim is that it consolidates all the key points of the path so that it makes it easier for a beginner to be able to apply it and put it into practice. we have also explained what, in this context, how we understand the term stages of the path, or Lam Rim, that this actually refers to those stages that we have to follow, that begin, first of all, finding a proper teacher, then understanding how difficult it is to find the precious human rebirth, then thinking about death and impermanence, then talk about refuge, talking about the law of cause and effect, and so forth. So all of these are stages, right? So this is what is implied by the term Lam Rim. Another way to understand the term Lam Rim is to say that these are the stages of the practice that one person would have to follow during their, let's say during the entire path, all the way until they reach the state of Buddhahood. And if you talk about this, then it is presented according to the practices that are shared with the individual of the small scope, then the practices that are shared with the individual of the middle scope, and then the practices of the individual of the great scope. So you begin by talking about all, what is necessary in order to obtain a good rebirth as a human or a god in your next life, the type of virtue that you need to maintain in order to reach that. And this will come under the presentation that is shared with the individual of the small scope. Then you have the presentation of things such as impermanence, the Four Noble Truths, the 12 links, and so forth, that are included within the presentation of the practices shared with the middle scope. And then finally, you have the presentation of compassion, of bodhicitta, of the six perfections that are the necessary trainings for the individual of the great scope. So it includes, the whole training from beginning to end for an individual to reach the state of Buddhahood. Okay, so as you can see here, the different scholars have different positions in terms of explaining the term stages of the path. However, whichever of the two ways you present it, actually the meaning at the end is the same. So here we are in our specific choice of the Lam Rim text, which is the Song of Spiritual Experience. As the title indicates, is something that is written out of experience. So this actually represents pith instruction that comes from Lama Tsongkhapa's own experience. So himself, having understood really how one progresses along the 5 paths and the 10 crowns, he composed that particular text. And this text is described as the text that has such great impact because it is concise, but it contains all the key points. And at the same time, it's easy to understand, easy to follow. You can see clearly what are the practices and so forth. Together with that, we have a number of other Lam Rim texts, such as the commentary to this by the Conqueror Sonam Gyatso, The Essence of Refined Gold. Then we have a text by the 5th Dalai Lama, which is Manjushri's own words. Then from Panchen Rinpoche, we have the easy path and the concise path and so forth. So in India also we have a number of other great scholars who have composed in Tibet and India who have composed Lam Rim texts. And at the end, if we follow that lineage of Lam Rim texts, we come to the Liberation of the Palm of Your Hand by Papomka Rinpoche, edited by Trichang Rinpoche. So all of them actually give us it gives us this whole material systematized in a very convenient manner. We have other texts, such as we have mentioned a few times, the Ornament of Realization, or the Prajnaparamita texts and so forth. These texts contain all the information and are the great classics. However, they are very difficult to comprehend. They're very difficult to study. But if we begin our study with the Lam Rim, then gradually, as a comprehension of all the elements of the path becomes more evident in our mind, then we have a chance of approaching those bigger, more difficult texts. So although it might be difficult to generate those root realizations that are included in the Lam Rim, please do not be discouraged. Please do not start thinking, oh, it is difficult, it's not for me, I won't be able to do it. Master Nagarjuna has said that between other people putting you down and yourself putting yourself down, the second one is the worst. So never put yourself down, never think I'm not good enough of that, I'm not sufficient for that. But instead think that I must make an effort to study the Lam Rim, to generate these realizations. Life after life, I will continue with my practice and the study of the Lam Rim. Generate a good motivation, a good enthusiasm. Don't be defeated already from the beginning. And just consider that what a great opportunity it is, a great fortune to study the Lam Rim, and make the decision and say, every day, I will try to familiarize my mind with the Lam Rim. So how many times have we said that the precious human rebirth that we have in this life is the result of virtuous karma that we accumulated in the previous life, all right? We understand that. So now we must think, okay, I achieved this in this life, but in my next life, I want to raise the bar. I want an even better life, an even better rebirth that will get me closer and closer to enlightenment. So we started last week and we saw that the very first verse is the verse of expression of homage of Je with great faith towards the Buddha. And this particular verse, your body is created from 1 billion perfect factors of goodness. Your speech fulfills the yearnings of countless sentient beings. Your mind perceives all objects of knowledge exactly as they are. O chief of Shakya clan, I bow my head to you. We find this at the beginning of other Lam Rim texts as well. It's an extremely powerful verse. It's a verse that invites the blessing of the body, the speech, and the mind of the Buddha to come and enter within us, and also creates auspicious causes for us to obtain the body, speech, and mind of the Buddha in the future. As we have said, there are various interpretations of the meaning of the text of this verse. Some are concise and easy to comprehend. Some run into many pages and are very involved and detailed. Okay, so very important verse. The first line, it says, your body is created from 1 billion perfect factors of goodness. So when the Buddha is established, obviously the Buddha will come with body, speech, and mind. And that body of the Buddha is created through an incredible accumulation of merit and wisdom that is amassed over a very long period of time, of 3 countless great eons. So this is how this body is created. Having worked so hard to build up this accumulation for such a strong time, for such a long time, this comes with incredible power and capacity. And this is reflected on the second line that says, your speech fulfills the yearnings of countless sentient beings. So the ability to fulfill the wishes of countless sentient beings, that each one has individual needs and capacities, is the ability that comes from, it's something that comes through the power of this accumulation. So, for example, when we say you fulfill the yearnings of countless sentient beings, if someone is in an isolated, deserted, hot place, what they will do is that they become very thirsty, and therefore their need and what they wish for is some water. So it is like providing water for those who are thirsty. Whatever is the individual need of individuals, the speech of the Buddha has the power to provide this by giving specific instruction and advice on how to overcome all the afflictions and progress along the path to Buddhahood. So we know that actually the qualities of the Buddha's body, speech, and mind are inconceivable for us. They are very difficult to count. They're very difficult to comprehend. However, from these 3 groups of qualities, the qualities of the speech of the Buddha are the ones that are the most amazing and most difficult for us to comprehend. So as we say, the Buddha speaks, and with one proclaimment, he actually addresses the needs of every individual who is in the audience, and he speaks in their own language, in their own dialect, and that speech comes with 60 tones of melodiousness. And it is a speech that only benefit others, will never harm others. It is a speech that proclaims unique teachings, the teachings that say that for the sake of others, you should sacrifice yourself, You should let go of your own needs in order to establish the needs of others. And it says that all your happiness and suffering are things that do not exist from their own side, but are established in dependence upon others. So it's the uniqueness of the message and the way that those teachings are delivered. Okay, so the important thing is that once someone reaches the state of Buddhahood, the only way or the best way to benefit the other beings is to teach Dharma. If you don't teach Dharma, if you don't give teachings, you're not benefiting sentient beings. If you teach, then others will listen, they contemplate, they meditate, and gradually we generate the realizations of the Lam Rim. So the advice of the Buddha is always benefit others, make sure you generate bodhicitta for the sake of others, do not harm others, always work for the benefit of others, and so forth. Geshe was saying there is this story, quite interesting, about the Geshes who went to Europe, and it was they heard about this person who he was quite wealthy, quite rich. However, his mind was disturbed. He was not at peace. He went for different therapies and none of these things worked. And somehow he met someone and that person said, well, perhaps it would be good if you read a little bit of Buddhist teachings. So this person actually found a book of His Holiness, the Dalai Lama. And of course, in this, he read the book and he said, the whole book was about benefiting others and putting others above yourself and generating bodhicitta. It's so annoying. I threw away the book. Okay, so it indicates if you don't know how to read a book, this might be your reaction. So this person actually didn't know how to interpret the situation. Perhaps he was a wealthy person because he was a businessman. But the thing is that to conduct business and trade and so forth, the wealth that you create only comes from interactions with others. If others don't give you money to buy your product, you will not become rich. So all the wealth and the affluence that he had and all that, it came from others, but he could not see this. He could not recognize this. The third line on the first verse, it says, your mind perceives all objects of knowledge exactly as they are. So through striving to build up the two types of accumulation over 3 countless great eons, the Buddha came to the end of traversing the 5 paths and the 10 grounds. And as a result of that, he reached the state of normal learning, which is the state of omniscience. Having reached the state of omniscience, he had a powerful mind that can comprehend both the ultimate and the conventional truths, not in an alternating manner, but simultaneously at the same time. So, which is an incredible power of the mind. So from our side, looking at the deeds of the Buddha, looking at the life of the Buddha with great faith, we should aspire to follow his example and practice in a similar way. The last line of the first verse, it says, O chief of the Shakya clan, I bow my head to you. We have explained that when our teacher was making the decision to come into this world, he had to make a few choices in terms of which place and which caste would be and which family to take rebirth in. And at that time, at the time of India, the Shakya clan, the royal household was the best choice. So this is why he chose to be reborn as a prince in that royal family. So he came and then eventually he practiced and he manifested the aspect of obtaining enlightenment. Then it says the second verse, with the second verse, Lama Tsongkhapa pays homage to the most excellent spiritual sons of the peerless teacher, who are Maitreya and Manjushri. So we have the words here, peerless teacher, and we have explained that Buddha Shakyamuni is praised to be the peerless teacher, not because of his powers of clairvoyance, not because of his magical powers, not because of being able to fly in the sky and to perform all sorts of miracles, but because due to his great accumulation over 3 countless great eons, he has achieved the speech that fulfills the hopes of each and every sentient being. So whatever he needs to teach, as we say, he can teach selflessness, he can teach impermanence, he can teach bodhicitta. He has given us a whole collection of 84,000 bundles of teachings to exactly fulfill individual needs of every sentient being. So for that reason, he is praised as being the peerless teacher. Buddha Shakyamuni, when he came into this earth, he lived up to 80 years. And during this time, he passed the entirety of his teachings into two main disciples, his spiritual sons, who are Maitreya and Manjushri. So, as Lama Tsongkhapa says here, you, Maitreya and Manjushri, you carry the burden of the enlightened activities of the conquerors, and in countless realms, you engage in ecstatic display of emanations. So, as we say, although these are divine beings, they can appear in different types of emanation according to the occasion and the needs of the disciples. So, at times, they can appear as ordinary humans, they can appear as ordained, and so forth. The previous Dalai Lama has said this story that at the time of the Buddha, often, those beings such as Maitreya, Manjushri, Vajrapani, they will all appear in the aspect of ordained monks, and they will go out for alms every day with their begging bowls. So on one occasion like this, they all went out, and Manjushri encountered an individual, a human, who was actually a Hinayana practitioner. However, he taught him about selflessness. And when he told him about selflessness, that person generated wrong views. So he started thinking nothing exists, the law of cause and effect does not exist, the three jewels don't exist, and so forth. So he generated wrong views. And dying, he was reborn in the hell due to having developed wrong views. So once the alms going out for the alms was finished, Manjushri, along with Maitreya and Vajrapani and everybody else, they came back. And at that point, all those bodhisattvas, the great beings, actually, more or less like ourselves, they discussed what happened during the course of the day. And they were all criticizing Manjushri, saying, look what he's done today. Actually, when you teach selflessness, you are supposed to lead sentient beings to the state of an arhat, to the state of liberation, and so forth. But he taught selflessness to a follower of the Hinayana practices. That person developed wrong views, and look at what happened now. The person ended up with a rebirth in the hells. So they went to report and complain about it to the Buddha. But when the Buddha heard about this, he actually praised Manjushri and said Manjushri is extremely skillful, because had he taught Hinayana tenets to that individual being a Hinayana practitioner would have obtained the Hinayana level of an arhat. And then for hundreds of eons, he would remain in that state without engaging in the Mahayana. However, as a result of having heard selflessness from Manjushri, he generated wrong views, he died, he went into the hills, but when he comes out of the hills, he will come up and obtain a precious human rebirth, and in that next rebirth, with those imprints, will engage the Mahayana. And therefore, the Buddha said, Manjushri was actually very skillful in teaching him that. There's no blame. Okay, so the story goes that the story is given here in order to explain this, line that we have, that Maitreya and Manjushri and so forth, they display emanations, right? So they can come in different aspects. So I'm sorry, I misheard the name. I thought it was the previous Dalai Lama. It was actually the previous Song Rinpoche. The previous Song Rinpoche, an extremely skillful teacher. He had an interaction with Westerners. He visited the West, and he was famed from being able to give all those incredible stories and very skillful teachings according to the occasion. Okay, so we actually came to the end of today's class, and Geshe was saying, I know everyone is tired after a long day. You have all had to get up in the morning, go to work, finish work, rush to come here. But it is good it's a good type of tiredness. It's good that you make the effort even at the end of such a long day. So consider your next life, consider the virtue that you create in this way. Nothing goes to waste. So eventually we will progress here with the text. We will engage all those stages of the path, starting with the proper way to rely on the teacher, and then seeing how difficult it is to find the precious human rebirth, considering death and impermanence, thinking about refuge, thinking the law of cause and effect, and so on and so forth. We will engage all this. Now, important message from today's class is to try as much as possible every day to minimize the amount of non-virtue and to increase as much as possible virtue. So when you wake up in the morning, start the day by setting up your motivation. It is as if you make a promise in the presence of the three jewels. Whether you have statues and tankas in the house, this is irrelevant. It is all in your mind. So you say, today, I will do my best to accumulate virtue as much as possible and to avoid negativity. And then if during the course of the day you do something inappropriate, such as, for example, speak in a harsh way to someone that you meet in the shops or whatever, then recognize this, regret it, and decide that you don't want to do that again. So if you familiarize yourself in this way, it will become easier to train the mind, and you will be able to see some improvement. So if you actually start the day like this and stick by your promise, even if somebody else abuses you, right? You remember your promise that you did in the morning and you say, no, I have made the promise that I will not speak in a bad way. I will not harm anyone. I will not accumulate negativity. And if you act in this way, then you will find how much happier your mind is. Because otherwise, if you decide to antagonize and retaliate, you will see you will have so many problems and a difficult situation. Next thing, you won't be able to eat or enjoy your food and so forth.